you may have seen from a previous video our very exciting announcement that we are going to Edinburgh Fringe this year, 2025. It's going off.
Woo!
And we briefly talked about the 2 shows that we will be taking to the Edinburgh Fringe. We talked about Strangers and Revelations by Chiedozi, which we also talked about in our episode about going to the Kenya International Theatre Festival. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a gem of an episode, if we do say so ourselves.
Right.
What we haven't talked about yet is the second play that we're going to be...
Hassan Govia.
By Hassan Govia, that we are going to be bringing to the Edinburgh Fringe. It is a solo show written and performed by yours truly called Because, and it premiered at the Cockpit for the 2024 Camden Fringe Festival in August 2024. I said 2024 twice. Does it matter?
No.
Do we care?
It's okay.
We're talking.
We'll be okay.
We're besties. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're besties with you. We're besties. It's besties all around. Our festival experience thus far extends to the Camden Fringe. That was, I think, the first time we were actively, as a company, a part of a theatre festival. Obviously, we'll be graduating to the stages of the Edinburgh Fringe, which is much bigger in scale, much more risky. But the Camden Fringe was also a part of our journey, and it's playing a huge part in why we're going to be going to Edinburgh this year. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can I just say, this show is really good.
Oh.
It's very intelligent, and he might downplay it, but like, it's really, really good.
I don't know if I'll downplay it. You're going to say it's clever, I'll take it.
No, it's very clever. It's very intelligent. And if you get an opportunity to watch it, I would say definitely do. Let's talk about like how we actually got to where we are right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it didn't start with Camden.
Yeah.
In the same way that Kenya didn't start with Kenya.
Exactly.
You need to watch that episode to see what we mean. Spoiler alert, guys. Stuff doesn't usually start where it ends. There's always an introductory
coming in with the gems.
Oh, as we do. But yeah, it didn't start with Camden Fringe, did it?
We applied to the Lyric Hammersmith. They had a residency, and we got it.
Yeah. It was their inaugural artistic residency scheme. It was the first time they'd ever done anything like that, I believe. And what it was an opportunity for companies who lived in the surrounding boroughs. So Brent, Hammersmith, I can't remember all of them, but I live in Brent. So I applied on that basis. And we basically got the opportunity to workshop a play in their studio space with their support. And we decided to work on Because for the first time, because I wrote it towards the end of 2020, the beginning of 2021. So the opportunity to do the residency, we hadn't done a solo show in our history of a company at that point. So we thought it would be a good testing ground to try that out, especially because you get the opportunity for the residency. But again, resources of our own were quite limited. So to try and find a play that required us to get loads of actors, again, that costs money, and it's money that we didn't have. So we thought, why not work on this show?
Yeah. And I feel it was a good shout. It was a good decision, and we learned a lot. I think I learned a lot just as like sort of someone who was sitting out and just literally watching you like
You're my director.
do your thing, like directing and stuff. That was really cool, and I think we gained a lot from that experience.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, you as well as a writer, like where you wanted to take it, like certain things that have now changed after workshopping it, certain discoveries. It was such a great opportunity, and I think we're really grateful for that.
If I just briefly talk a little bit about the show, because in terms of finding its identity, the lyric was a huge part of that experience, but what encouraged me to write the show in the first place. This is a little bit paradoxical, and don't judge me, but I'm really not the biggest lover of one-person shows.
Oh yeah, I remember
that. That's
actually
kind of where it came from. And there's something about leaning into things you don't like. The pandemic was a very scary time for people, and things in the arts were very unpredictable. If there ever felt like a time where you might just need a one-person show in your back pocket, that felt like the time, because of all the different regulations that were coming in, social distancing, things like that meant that you couldn't necessarily guarantee that you'd be able to perform in shows with more than one person. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to try my hand at something I didn't like, and try and present it in a way that excited me, that maybe I hadn't seen done in another show before. Doesn't mean it hasn't been done, but just means I haven't seen it done in that way. Being a part of the lyric scheme really helped me to flesh that out. The play is quite experimental in the way it's presented. Yeah, I'm not going to give too much away, because you really need to come and see it. All I will say is that the form of it is quite challenging. And so having that opportunity to work on it really helped us to see what worked and what didn't.
I think that's why I'm saying it's so intelligent, because there's so much going on in that space of time. I'm like, I don't know how an actor is able to actually achieve that in such a short space of time. But yeah, It's exciting. Like I said, you need to watch to know what I'm talking about.
You fancy taking a train to Scotland, coming to see us at the Fringe? We ain't gonna stop you.
So after sort of working on Because at the Lyric, we decided to actually venture into something else, which we were talking about already during the pandemic, which was scratch nights. So we kind of shelved Because a little bit, and then we went into exploring scratch nights, how to put on a scratch night, and what we wanted out of that. And then that's how Universal was actually birthed, which is super, super exciting.
We talk a lot more about Universal in another video that we've put together about scratch nights. So if you want to know more about that, check that out. So fast forward, and 2 writing events in our arsenal later, we decided to venture back into putting on full-length plays. Universal was a very rewarding process, but it did feel at that point in time that we could only give so much to it.
I'm all for scratch nights. I think they're amazing. I just think for us at that time, I feel like the transition was definitely to get into full plays again.
And I think it was good that we took a break from doing full-length plays because it did get us to expand our horizons. But when we did decide to revisit, okay, what are we going to do next? I thought, when you're working with like 20 plus people, you suddenly think, let's just try and scale down a little bit.
It's a lot.
It really, really was. I felt passionate about revisiting this solo show. At the time, I originally wanted to take it to Edinburgh. That's really what the plan was. And if you look at the video where we announced that we're going to the Edinburgh Fringe, I do briefly talk about that. The timing just was all wrong. So we weren't able to secure a venue for 2024. But what it did do was it planted a seed and made me think, well, how can we bring this show to life in 2024? I knew I didn't have the instinct for no reason. It just probably meant that the Edinburgh route was not the right route at the time. We live in London, and I thought, well, you decided that you wanted to do a festival. So there is another festival that happens at the same time as the Edinburgh Fringe, which might be a little bit less risk. It might be a good opportunity for you to test what you can do, and it might be a good starting point for the play's journey. And that was the Camden Fringe. It happens end of July to August every year. I think it runs pretty much at the same time as the Edinburgh Fringe, but it's just very different in terms of how it's set up. Like for Edinburgh, you can go for as long as the full festival. You can do short runs, you can do longer runs. But with Camden, you're only really going to do a few nights. You can switch it up and do it in different venues. There's a lot about the festival that's sort of unique to the festival. But I think if you're a London-based artist at least, it just feels a little bit more familiar. I have performed in the Camden Fringe as an actor. Ironically, that's where I met the director who directed Because. They directed me in a show at the Camden Fringe a few years prior. So it was a nice full circle moment for us. But I just thought, yeah, why not? We can probably find another opportunity to stage the show. And that opportunity became the Camden Fringe. We applied through Eventatron, if you've ever heard of that. It's basically a platform where you can apply to all of the different fringe festivals who use the service. Not everybody does. The director and I were talking about the piece and what we maybe wanted to achieve with it artistically, because as we say, we worked on it at the Lyric, but the show that we brought to the Lyric was quite different to what we ended up with. We didn't know where it was going. This was when we decided to work with a director who wasn't one of us, someone who could bring a fresh eye to the piece. And when we were talking about the things we might have wanted to achieve, we landed on the Cockpit, which is a studio theatre based in sort of the Marylebone area, if you've never heard of it.
Such a brilliant space.
You can achieve so much in that space. I think that's what was attractive to us. Usually fringe setups are quite limited in terms of tech, in terms of lighting. We just saw the scope of what could possibly be achieved in that space. And so we decided that's where we wanted to be. Lo and behold, we applied, we got a space, and then the process began. And what did that process consist of?
Getting the right team.
The team wasn't huge. We worked with a director, obviously. We also eventually brought a sound designer on board, and we worked with someone who, the title is a scenographer. They studied scenography, but a lot of that influence that they had was on our lighting design. That was the team that we put together, and it all came together quite organically through the connections of the director. We also self-funded this show, so my salary basically paid for it. I just couldn't bring myself to do a crowdfunder. There was also limited funding sources, but also because the scale of the show wasn't huge in terms of it was a few nights versus like a 3-week run or something like that, I just felt like this is something I could personally leverage to just see how it goes and take that risk on myself. Before we got into rehearsals, there was dramaturgy sessions with the director. So our director came on board pretty much as a director and a dramaturge, because that's how they like to work. And that's where we really, really fleshed out the identity of the show, worked out exactly what we wanted to present. And it's quite funny because when I say the show changed quite drastically from the lyric, when we were at the lyric, we had to present a section of the play, and it was up to us how we did that, what we chose to show. I ended up performing a section of the piece that took 50 minutes to perform, and that didn't even take us halfway through the play. Fast forward to 2024, and we have these dramaturgy sessions. The entire length of the play is 50 minutes, because that's perfect for festival runs. And that was hugely down to the dramaturgy sessions that we had with the director. I was working on the piece as well, but we knew that bringing it to festivals, you can't really make them longer than 50 minutes to an hour. Some people do, but typically the amount of time that you run it for is about 50 minutes. So the dramaturgy sessions really did help to give the play a bit of a facelift that it absolutely needed.
I think with the story, it really helped as well to be a lot more clearer. Those 50 minutes are so like precious gold from the beginning to like the end. It's,
High praise, I have to live up to this.
No, for real.
She's
for
right.
real.
She's right.
Another thing is when the show was on, we had feedback forms that I gave out, and people could actually put their feedback. So, I'm not talking out of, out of anything. That's always so useful as well in terms of the growth of the work and where we're taking it.
The journey's never done, guys. The deadlines might be over, but the journey's never done. And then we got into rehearsal. I think it's important to talk a little bit about rehearsals sometimes, because when you're navigating your creative outputs with a full-time job, you rehearse in the evening. And that's what we had to do. We had almost a month's worth of evening rehearsals. Not every day, but it was over a good couple of weeks. 2 nights one week, 3 nights another week. Leading up to the show, there was like a consistent run of evening rehearsals that we did. And again, that just comes down to, it was a self-funded project. We weren't getting paid to do it. I wasn't getting paid to do it. We did pay the creative team, but at the time, we were hinging on maybe ticket sales to try and help us with that. I had put aside something to be able to make sure that we could pay people something. So nobody on the team was going to go away empty-handed. But in terms of ourselves, that sacrifice was that we were just working on the show. And as we tend to do with every show that we've done so far, we just work from a place of passion and hope that we figure it out eventually. And so we couldn't really ask too much of everybody involved. Similar to Universal, actually, where even though we had to have more rehearsals this time, it had to fit in around people's full-time commitments. It just had to. So we rehearsed in the evening. I'm not sure what every show does or what every company does. Surely, if you're being fully funded and you can pay people a salary that equates to equity minimum wage, then by all means, you can have daytime rehearsals and everything is fine. But that's not a luxury that a lot of companies have, unfortunately, especially if you're artist producers. For festivals, you're not actually eligible for a lot of funding sources unless you have like maybe a tour or something, and the festival is part of a tour, which this wasn't. We were just putting on a show for a couple of nights. There's really no funding routes for that. Or if there is, we don't know about it. If you know about any, maybe let us know in the comments. But as of right now, we don't know any. And we have to kind of take this risk on ourselves if we decide to do it. I didn't even know what we were really trying to achieve. I just knew we wanted to do another piece of work. And
I love that.
Do you know what I mean?
love the honesty in that.
I don't know. We needed another show, and I was passionate about bringing the show to life eventually. So it just felt like that was the right time.
And I felt like Camden came again. There's something that just come so, not randomly as such, but they come in a way that you're like, I feel like I need to do this.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like the opportunity came. And then I was like, okay, let's apply and see.
We haven't told them what the show's about, or have we?
We actually have not. Maybe tell them a little bit, but don't tell them too much.
I won't, but you're probably thinking, what the hell is the show?
Yeah.
You're talking about the show like we know about the show
Hashtag because. Like,
hashtag because. Like, hashtag because. You're talking
Mr.
because.
Govia.
So, Because is a solo show, as I have said, that centers around a character called Jade, who is a 30-something man of color. And he's what I would call a chronic overthinker. So in terms of how the play is structured, it sort of navigates how he works through his thought processes. I won't tell you how, because you do have to come and see it in order to find that out. He receives a piece of news that he wasn't expecting to receive. What that does is unearth a lot of buried memories and traumatic experiences as a result of him being bullied when he was younger. that lends itself to what can only really be described as an existential crisis. As a result, he sort of grapples with his sense of reality, and in terms of how he navigates his thought processes, what once was a comforting way of exploring that eventually becomes an uncomfortable way of processing. And I think that's all I'm going to say.
That, like, the room got deep. Like, it was like, whew.
Yeah.
Heavy.
I mean, the themes that it covers are what some would consider to be heavy. It does deal with bullying. It deals with mental health, specifically undiagnosed mental health. And I was quite adamant about that, because for a lot of us, mental health experiences, I mean, I don't want to be flippant when I say this, because I think part of what the show tries to raise awareness about is the importance of understanding that maybe you're going through a mental health crisis, because I would argue that being diagnosed is probably a luxury. You see a lot of work from the perspective of a specific mental illness, but you don't always, or certainly not in this way, I think, or I haven't seen it happen in this way, with a character like Jade at the centre. Seeing someone grapple with their mental health but maybe not know that that's what's happening, and not know that there needs to be some sort of intervention, I thought that was a much more interesting and honest angle for me and my experience to tackle it from. It grapples with privilege and conversations around that.
I think what I love about it is, although the subjects you tackle are quite deep, there is humor in it as well. And I know you don't like to label yourself as a funny person.
I'm not promising I'm
And
going to
I
make you
don't
laugh,
think
guys.
you-
I'm so sorry.
But there literally are moments where you do laugh. I know that was definitely not intentional on your part, because you never write to make people laugh. But
I really don't.
I think
I'm so sorry.
it really does bring a lightheartedness in the deepness. Still deep, still very deep, still very captivating. But I think you managed to balance the two.
The more intentional thing on my part was to try and create a gripping piece of drama. Something that was honest, something that was a little bit raw, but also something that hopefully engages you to really, really explore Jade's story and have conversations about it afterwards. It's not a play that comes to easy conclusions. I think I will manage expectations about that from the jump, but I do think it's a worthwhile watch. It definitely has a place in the theatre space, and it definitely had place to be explored at Camden, and there is going to be space to continue exploring it, because as I said, we're taking it to the Fringe, so we're taking it to Edinburgh. So we go from rehearsals and then Showtime. It always comes. It always comes. I'm not going to say it was easy. And I'm not talking necessarily from a performing perspective, because that's actually not the hard part for me, regardless of what I'm performing. This is why we put in all the work that we put in, to be able to perform. But if you've watched our video about producing our first play, Bougie, you may know about some of the difficulties we encountered with that from a marketing perspective. And let's just say it was very similar this time around. And I think there were a few mistakes that were made this time in terms of maybe overreaching a little bit, which tends to be a bit of a theme with us. We always do that little bit extra and sometimes come up a little bit short, but I do think that the intention to aim high is always good. But the show ran for 4 nights, and the Cockpit is a huge space. We weren't able to fill out 4 nights in that space, and it does make me think we did like 1 performance too many, because 3 I think we could have just about handled. And I think when you do these festival slots, you want to try and maximize things like the amount of reviews that you can get. Sometimes if it's too short of a run, you sometimes are not sure what the benefit is, depending on what your goals are. If you just want to do it for things like audience feedback, then 1 or 2 performances is fine. But for us, we wanted to try and see it as a starting point for the show. And in order for the show to move forward, you do need things like reviews, material, production photos. You don't need to do a show for more than 1 or 2 performances to get production photos. But I just thought, if we try and maximize what we can get from this run, it might serve us better for future runs. But unfortunately, we did have low audience numbers for this. We actually paid for marketing this time, but in terms of what our budget was with marketing, our reach was only going to go so far. And it's also a new show. And this is the thing about doing new shows, especially when your reputation is still growing. If people don't necessarily know who you are as being a regular staple in the theatre scene, you have to work very hard to get your show out there, very hard. And that's not a negative mindset, it's just a fact. In terms of putting a product out there, it takes a lot more than doing a little bit of flyering. It takes a lot more than putting up posters, which we paid for people to do, and we also put up posters ourselves in areas where we could. We paid for a social media ad campaign. And the thing is, I was seeing people get our ads come up on their Facebook and stuff like that. It even came up on my Facebook and my Instagram. But that's like someone's first introduction to something. So them seeing just one social media ad, it's not going to necessarily make them come to see the show. You do need a lot more assets. You do need a lot more promotional material. And I think that when you're doing a show for a very short run, especially if it's a new show, these things are just hard to get unless you have some very established backing behind you, which as much as we back ourselves and in our mind, we are capable of doing anything we put our minds to, logistically and in this framework of how things work, you just needed a bit more if we were going to really, really sell. So it wasn't a big seller.
I do think the win, though, was firstly a really good performance. Thank you. For all 4 performances. The other thing was the reviews themselves. I was really happy to see some of the things that were said about your show, and also to have people coming to me, because I was the nagging sort of person, like, please fill out our audience feedback, you know, like just so that we know, like, how did people actually feel about it. And I think the feedback was positive, and, you know, just having people, you know, have future aspirations and like try give advice and stuff like that. So I think there were wins despite like obviously our low numbers.
I'm very honest about low numbers because I think for a lot of people, there's this sense that if you don't sell, why are you doing it again? And I think what we have to realize is that selling out a show takes a lot more than just having a good show. It just does. For us, you don't stop because you didn't get that validation, because actually what we did achieve, as you say, the feedback that we got was extremely positive, which shows that there is life for this show yet, but also artistically what we were able to achieve. I was so impressed with us. Our director and our creative team really pulled through, because from a Fringe scale, what we were able to do is quite impressive. You could see some of the production pictures to see what we were doing with lights, and we did some really cool things with sound. We had a bare stage. We didn't have any props on stage, but one of the most captivating things about it was the direction and the way in which we used the space and just made the most of what we had. So it definitely lends itself to us doing this again. What that showed me was marketing is always going to be a bit of a battle, and we're going to get there. We are going to get there. At some point, we're going to be good at this, but we have to keep learning and we have to keep trying. If the work is worth it, then you have to keep fighting for it. And I actually had someone say to me, keep fighting for the show. Keep putting it out there. So that's what we're doing.
And that's why it's going to Edinburgh.
That's why it's going to Edinburgh. And actually before Edinburgh, it is also going to Brighton Fringe for 2 performances. How could we forget? We've got a good run of the show coming up this year, which I'm really excited about. And I'm going to put ticket links to both in the description below so that you don't miss the opportunity to see it at any of those ventures. The Edinburgh link might come a little bit later, depending on when you're watching the video. So do keep coming back or looking out for that. And yeah, we did it. We crossed the finish line. And actually, even after the show, I got the opportunity to speak on a podcast that was being run by Everything Theatre, which is a review site. They did a call out on social media and basically asked for companies who wanted to talk about their experience at the Camden Fringe. We got in there quickly, and I will also link that podcast in the description, because I do talk about some of the challenges that were experienced, but also reflect on some of the positives. That podcast, it's not just me, it's other creators who took part in the Camden Fringe, and I do think it gives you a varied perspective about how the festival can go. The other thing I will say is I absolutely loved the space that we performed in, but one of the things I learned from the podcast is it probably didn't benefit from having that festival buzz. It's not as in Camden as some of the other venues, and a lot of the other venues had this sort of buzz around them, at least from what was being explained on the podcast, that I think the Cockpit was a little bit removed from that. Maybe in terms of footfall, it probably didn't benefit there, but that's no shade on the venue. They were such lovely staff. They were really, really good to us, and I would love to put on a show there again. So when the time is right and when we have the right material and when we can really market the hell out of it, we are coming. But I think that sums up our Camden Fringe experience. Definitely worthwhile. Always lessons learned. And a stepping stone for what's to come.
Hallelujah.
And what's to come, babe?
Edinburgh Fringe.
We're going to keep telling you.
Edinburgh Fringe.
We're going to keep telling you.
Don't you forget it.
Don't you forget it.
See you there.
See you there. Subscribe to know when our next episodes are coming out, because as we said in our Edinburgh episode, that episode was the start of our Journey to Edinburgh series, which is our first series on this YouTube platform. We're really making some headway with YouTube. I'm so happy about that.
I know. I'm so proud of us.
I'm proud of us. I'm proud of us. If you told us last year that this is what we'd be doing, we probably wouldn't believe you.
Yeah, we would.
But we saw an opportunity and we're taking it. Do let us know in the comments. Just talk in the comments. Just talk.
Let us know.
Let us know if you're going to go to the Camden Fringe this year?
Or Edinburgh Fringe.
If you're just doing Fringe, let us know. Let the people know in the comments. You can spam the comments with your stuff. It's fine.
Yeah. Let us know your experience as well.
Yeah, if you've got experiences about the Camden Fringe that you can share. It is a lesser talked about festival. Edinburgh takes the focus at that time of year, and I think that London has a number of different Fringe festivals, some of which are no longer with us, sadly, but Edinburgh is very much that focal point of that time. And it would be nice for Camden to get a little bit more spoken about. Yeah, so talk.
Definitely.
Talk. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
Guys. Bye.
See you in the next one.
Laters.
Laters.
Where did that come from? You see, that's the thing. Where does that come from?
Go.
It's the most craziest thing.
We love it. Laters.
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 I cannot with myself.